And here we are with our webinar today, hosted by the Guild with Brittany Barreto, Dr. Brittany Barreto from FemTech Focus. And FemTech Focus is a nonprofit organization, and I'll let you explain it better than I could, Brittany. But what's important today about us co-hosting this event together is that this is a partnership with two women's organizations, or organizations in general, merging together and partnering. And you know, that's not normal for women, right? Sometimes. So I'm really, really excited that we have you here today, Brittany, and that we're working together and that we're going to announce a big, big partnership today between the Guild and FemTech Focus. So I will tell you a few things about the Guild before I introduce you, and then we're going to kick off, okay? All right, so the Guild is a global community of female entrepreneurs and investors and innovators, and we bring women together from all over the world to collaborate and to co-create and to learn and support each other. We have about 20,000 women now in our network. We have people from, I see here, Australia, Azerbaijan, you know, all the way to El Salvador, and I'm really excited that we're doing this as a global community and not just in our little innovation bubbles all over the world, right? So my name is Anne Coquette. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Guild, and we are also creating educational programs to get early stage aspiring entrepreneurs to the point where they can go and build these big, great, amazing companies. And we are going to announce something big today at the end of this webinar. So I'm gonna do a ... at this point. I'm gonna lead right into the State of FemTech presentation today here with Brittany. So Brittany, over to you to introduce yourself and to take us through what you've learned in the 55 interviews, or maybe even more at this point, that you've done in the past month with these incredible innovators in the FemTech space.
Thank you, Anne. Hello, everybody. I am seriously so excited. I am in Houston, so I was a little worried about the hurricane get in the way of this event, but if you're in Louisiana, East Texas, positive energy out to you. But I am grateful to have power so we can talk about the landscape of FemTech. So let me share my screen real quick. I think I closed the tab so you don't have to judge me how many I have open, because there's a lot. It's how my brain functions. All right. Okay. Can y'all see that? And just give me a nod. Yeah, cool. All right, great. So the FemTech landscape, trends that I've seen after 63. Yes, the Eventbrite said 55, but since then we have done 8 more, 63 FemTech interviews. And what do I mean by interviews? Well, FemTech Focus has a very popular podcast of which I am the host. And so these interviews are essentially the podcast interviews. Very excited today that FemTech Focus is partnered with the Guild. Throughout this presentation, please tweet at us, message us, you know, comment, take a screenshot, make sure that my face isn't weird, like make sure I'm smiling, and post it and tag us at Get Gilded and at FemTech Focus, and I'm at Dr. Brittany Barreto. Really excited about this today. So a little bit about FemTech Focus. We are a 501c3 pending nonprofit entity empowering the FemTech industry through increased awareness of the FemTech industry to the tech world in general, providing resources to FemTech founders, and creating opportunity to support FemTech startups through exposure, networking, and access to capital. A little bit about the co-founders. So Julie Hakim is my amazing co-founder. She is a pediatric gynecologist. She's inventor of a medical device for a vaginal stint. She is a serial entrepreneur and absolutely incredible. I learned so much about vaginas from her. She's the only other person I know that says the V word as often as I do. So we are a match made in heaven. And then myself, Dr. Brittany Barreto, my background's PhD in genetics. I am a serial entrepreneur. I founded a DNA-based dating app startup called Pheromore. Check it out, it's pretty cool. And then I've been a venture capitalist for the last 18 months and startup consultant. My lane of genius is fundraising, getting founders access to capital. I love helping founders get money. That's what you need. That's what I want to help you get. And I want to let you know that we have this incredible podcast, FemTech Focus. It's on Spotify and iTunes. We have thousands of downloads. I started it in March when we went into lockdown, because what better thing to do with your time than start a women's health and wellness podcast. So launched it in March, and we are already downloaded in over 39 countries, thousands of downloads. Please check it out. It's super fun. It's super awesome. So, and then the Guild. We are so excited to be partnered with such an established and successful company. So the Guild, some information on them is that through curated offline and online one-to-one introductions, fun, informative events, advocacy research, and their own educational programs, the Guild helps women of all ages and career stages connect with the right person and resources at the right time in their career to bring them closer to fulfilling their potential. So I always think of this as like a souped up LinkedIn for badass women. That's how I think about it. So I love the one-on-one introductions they make for us, and they have incredible programming such as the Guild Academy. So the Guild Academy was launched earlier this year, and they've already graduated over 120 founders. It is a virtual accelerator of which I saw the curriculum and was like, this is amazing. And you know, got to talking with Anne. One more second, you have to wait for me to tell you what we're gonna do. But please, you know, tag them throughout this presentation as well, because they're an incredible partner. And Anne, who introduced me, thank you, Anne. Tag her as well. Mission-driven leader, community builder, startup founder, super awesome. Also, they have a virtual conference coming up, Serendipity. Check it out, letsguild.com. You can get your ticket there. Dun, da, da, da. Guild Academy, FemTech Edition. So we have partnered with the Guild in order to create a virtual accelerator that is based off of the Guild's curriculum, but infused with FemTech specific advice, FemTech specific experts, and FemTech specific content. So if you want to take your startup, or maybe you just have an idea, to the next level in women's health and wellness, then you have got to apply. Here are some of the amazing mentors and investors that are going to be there and working with you one-on-one. Applications close September 18th. So get your application in now, pronto. Go to letsguildacademy.com/femtech. All right, all the intros. I know you're here for the data, but you got to sit through the intros, you know, but it's important info. What is FemTech? FemTech, this is my definition. It's ever evolving. It's a new term, but for FemTech Focus, FemTech is technology, services, and products that improve women's health and wellness. It was coined by Ida Tien, founder of Clue, in 2016, when she was trying to describe what the industry was that she worked in, and she didn't realize that she coined something that we all really latched onto, because words are important. And when you finally have a word for a category and industry, we can start to publish things on it. We can have podcasts named after it. We can have newsletters made after it, right? So words are important. So super awesome. In 2016, we had a word for what this is, women's health and wellness. For FemTech Focus, we do consider cis and trans women and girls as part of FemTech. So that is not necessarily something that Ida, you know, she didn't give us a full definition. It's ever evolving, but for FemTech Focus, we do include anyone who identifies as a woman and anyone who has a uterus. So whatever you want. Conditions. So what does it include? When you say women's health and wellness, what does it include? It includes conditions that solely, like menopause, disproportionately, like migraines, or differently, like heart attacks, affect women. All right, so it doesn't always have to be about reproduction. It can be about the 80% of people with Alzheimer's are women. It's the, you know, women exhibit heart attacks differently than men, and so their chances of death are higher because doctors don't recognize the symptoms correctly. It's the women were not included in clinical trials until 1993, right? So our side effects are twofold as high as men to drugs because clinical trials didn't include our biology. This is what we at FemTech Focus define as FemTech. Moreover, a lot of people hear FemTech, they say, oh yeah, female founders, you gotta fund them. Female founders are great, female founders. And I'm like, yes, we do have a majority female founders because a lot of them have uteruses and problems that they personally want to fix and innovate for. But I am actually very bullish. If you are a listener to our podcast, you will know that Brittany is very bullish on men should care about uteruses too. And men should not be questioned as to why are they pitching a menopause startup by investors, because what that tells me is that there's literally there's a feeling in the community that it is weird for men to care about women's bodies. But I am sure that many, many women contributed to the development of Viagra. And if 40% of men were struggling to orgasm, which is the percentage for women, I am sure there would be a solution already. So anyways, all genders, everybody get together, let's do it. Although we do have about, I think the latest percentage is 85% of FemTech founders are women. PitchBook actually just did us a huge favor this morning and published an awesome report. We'll share it on our social if you want to see it. But I looked through their report this morning. They define FemTech as general health and wellness, healthcare and diagnostics, reproductive health, and pregnancy and family care. You can cut it all different ways. This is a really incredible image from Women's.Health. Women's.Health is an amazing website. If you haven't checked it out, bookmark it. It's really great. It's through the Women's Health Innovation Coalition, which is from the Springboard Enterprise group. So Springboard Enterprise, 20 years old, amazing organization. If you don't know them, look them up. They created this website, Women's.Health, and they analyze what are all the things that are affecting women, and they created this incredible visual of the 7 main categories of health things for women, health and wellness. What I like to do, and I did this for way too many hours yesterday, is actually rearrange this image and look at it on how do you see it being things that solely affect women, disproportionately affect women, or differently affect women. Now, sometimes the disproportionate and different, you can be in both, right? So lung cancer affects women differently and disproportionately, right? And so I separated this. So oncology, there are types of cancers that only affect women disproportionately and differently. We have sexual wellness, things that only affect women, like painful sex, or disproportionately affect women or differently affect women. We have OB-GYN. Obviously, that's a huge category with our reproductive organs. But then what I want to bring your attention to is most people don't think about FemTech as being brain health, autoimmune disease, bone health, or heart health. These are things, obviously, that don't only solely affect women. Men have immune systems, brains, bones, and hearts, believe it or not, they do. And, but what's really interesting is that many researchers have assumed that women are just tiny men, and that our biology and our metabolism and everything is the same. But what we are realizing is that that is absolutely not the case. Our metabolism is different. Things that affect us show up differently in our bodies. And so it's really important to go back, even if we have, studied anxiety or depression or anemia or lupus many times over, maybe millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars have gone into cardiac research. But when cardiac research, 2/3 of the research is only done on men, there becomes this issue of, well, where's the women, right? So this is what some categories of FemTech are. This is my personal, like how I divvy it up. So we have reproductive health, menstrual health, and there's a solid box around that because I think that that is the thing that is most saturated in this market, and we're gonna get into that a little bit more, but that is like the main, like when people think FemTech, they think fertility, right? Or fertility and periods, but we're much more than fertility and periods. Next with sexual wellness and pelvic and uterine health. I put a dotted line around that because it is upcoming. There are a lot of innovations happening there. It's not too far off. People are like, oh yeah, pelvic floor health or, sexual pleasure or hygiene. So those are upcoming. They still need some help. But then we have things like the bone health, the oncology, the autoimmune, and the brain health. So this is kind of how I divvy up the categories of what femtech is. You can also cut it another way. You can look at it this way. So femtech is medical devices, healthcare software, therapeutics, consumer products, consumer services, and consumer apps. Whichever way is easiest for you to digest, or whichever way gets you to apply for that grant, use it, right? You can rearrange the words however you need to. I also think that femtech is absolutely socially impactful. So these are not nice to have innovations. These are vital innovations. The definition of vital is life-giving. My co-founder, Dr. Julie Hakim, invented the vaginal stint, which essentially you can think about it like a medical grade tampon, because she is a pediatric gynecologist and sometimes she needs to reconstruct vaginas. And there is no medical grade tampon to help the vagina stay open after surgery. And so they are stuck with putting cotton into a medical glove and lodging that into the little girl's vagina, sewing her labia shut, and having her lay in the hospital for a week, because no one has invented a vaginal stint yet. This is what I mean by vital innovation, that when women have pelvic area radiation for cancer, 9 times out of 10, their vaginas are so burnt that they're actually sealing shut. And there's divorce rate statistics of post-cancer survival. So this is vital innovation. This isn't like women are like, we want nicer things. This is like, why do these not exist yet type of stuff, right? Moreover, you can be in femtech and work specifically on developing countries. How do we get women around the world access to all of the healthcare, and that includes abortion and contraception, and also in menstrual products? How do we get every woman in the world access to the things that they need? And empowerment. At FemTech Focus, our tagline is women's health is everyone's health. If you improve a woman's health, you improve the health of her partner. You improve the health of her children. Women do not only birth women, we birth boys, right? And so if you improve a woman's health, you improve literally every gender's health. Also, you improve society's health. You're improving her businesses. She's showing up. She's not having 10 hot flashes a day. She's a powerhouse in that boardroom. She's not taking off because of her endometriosis, right? So when we improve women's health, we're empowering everybody. The femtech market, largely underserved with huge opportunities for growth. So, I know a lot of people know the number of Frost & Sullivan put out $50 billion femtech market. I actually was on a panel the other day with Rachel Braun-Schroll and Untitled Kingdom, shout out, they're a great organization. We talked about this number and how I think that's a big number, but I actually don't think it's all the biggest number it could be. So when we break down different market sizes of different segments, we have 36 billion for fertility, 63 billion for female hygiene, 37 billion for sexual wellness. So huge, huge market sizes. Purchasing power of women. There's $20 trillion of worldwide spending by women. 85% of consumer purchases are done by women. 80% of healthcare decision purchases are done by women. Women have purchasing power. Also, 85% of our founders in femtech are female. And although we're not about, just females rock. We rock, man. We have 2x the revenue that male founders do. We have 35% higher return on investment than our male counterpart founders. We have 22% lower employee turnover. We're awesome. If you want to make money, if you want to be rich, you should invest in femtech, is like the moral of that story. All right, so I've done 63 femtech interviews. I tried to figure out like which categories, and I put a bunch of logos up. I know it's like crazy, but the feeling you should get from this is, damn, this lady's talked to a lot of people in a lot of countries and a lot of topics. We also at FemTech Focus have our own database. So one of the things that absolutely drives me bananas is that we do not have accurate, up-to-date, exhaustive data on the femtech industry. Who's investing? What are the companies? How are they doing? How many employees do they have? Who's fundraising? How many exits do we have? Yes, I have several slides on exits. We're going to talk about exits. But FemTech Focus is actually building our own database of femtech startups. If you would like a copy of this, you can go to letsguildacademy.com/femtech. actually don't think it's on that URL. And if you could put it in the chat, the URL we need for the PDF. Thank you. Yes. You can actually download our database. So, all right. So how do we build this database? Well, every time we get a newsletter or an announcement or we see something on Facebook, I have this incredible intern named Kayla. Kayla, shout out to you. Her job is to enter these manually into this database. Go, Kayla. We are up to 300 femtech startups. To the best of my knowledge, this is the largest database. Even PitchBook this morning, they had about 150 companies in their report. So I think this is the largest one. And what we can see is that, you know, we are not being biased in who we're adding. We are just adding, if you are in femtech, we're adding you. And what we're seeing is a trend. We're seeing a trend of saturation or a lot of startups in fertility, menstruation, maternal health, sexual wellness, breastfeeding, and menopause. And what we're seeing kind of on the other end of the spectrum of where we have maybe 1 or 2 startups that we've even come across, we have, you know, vaginal health, urinary health, so UTIs, endometriosis, breast health. So these are things that still absolutely, in mental health, absolutely needs support. So let's break this down a little bit more. Oh, by the way, Rock Health, another awesome venture fund. They invest in digital health, and they have smartened up and realized the opportunity in femtech, and they did this amazing report. I'll be sprinkling graphs from that report throughout this presentation. Here's one of them. As a scientist, as a geneticist, you always want to verify, are other people finding these trends too? And sure enough, Rock Health published this graph that fertility is the most prominent category, followed by sexual and gynecological, and then maternal health, and then chronic disease, and then lifestyle and wellness. So we are on track with independent people finding similar things. Okay, so I just told you here are the areas of saturation. What I'm not going to do is tell you that you should not innovate in them. Maybe you already are and you're like, oh no, oh, like, should I not continue? You should continue, because even though we have a lot of startups in these categories, I have an issue with every one of them. So let's break it down. Fertility. Less than 45% of the US female population is of reproductive age, and only 10% of those women struggle with getting or staying pregnant. So this is actually the only one that I'm gonna say we probably are saturated and good on it, because if you think about how many women actually are experiencing infertility issues compared to how many women are entering menopause, which is 100% of them that pass that age threshold, I think that we should focus on a different category. So fertility, if you have another at-home hormone test, it better be leaps and bounds better than what exists, because period trackers and at-home hormone tests are, you know, pretty saturated. You need to have some blockchain, AI, genetic engineered, CRISPR-Cas, something next level technology if you are really going to dominate that fertility space. Menstruation, okay. You know, it looks like it's saturated, but why don't all women have access to products? Why do I still need to put a quarter in my tampon machine at the, you know, at the mall? Why have we not innovated that? Why isn't there a QR code for me to pay with? Why do women in jails not have access to tampons? Why do homeless women, you know, women experiencing homelessness? So I think that there's actually still huge social impact innovation needed for the menstrual hygiene industry. Maternal health. Okay, pretty saturated, right? Yet the US has the worst maternal mortality rate of any developed country. Why are Black women dying twice as often as white women in the US 1 year post-birth? Hispanic women are 3 times as likely. So although maternal health may be getting addressed, we obviously are still missing the mark because women are dying. Sexual wellness. When I looked through the sexual wellness category we had, a lot of them were for pleasure, measuring your orgasm, you know, having, you know, better lubes, and, you know, which is all lovely and wonderful. I was an independent sex toy seller in college. I'm all for it. But dysfunction still needs help. Low libido, issues with climax, comfortable sex. Absolutely, all of these things still need innovating. Breastfeeding, I think the pumps are mostly good, but what happens post milking of the breast? What happens, right? Women are still storing their milk in freezers. There's a new company I just came across here in Houston called Milkify, where they actually freeze dry the milk and it's good for 2 years, right? Like, so I see saturation, but then I'm also like, yeah, of course, but like what happens after the milk? Or what if the woman doesn't have milk? The logistics, the supply chain management of breast milk still needs innovating. And then menopause, there's a lot of telehealth and community and educational things coming out around menopause, Geneve, sHealth, but there are 35 symptoms of menopause, of which most of the treatments right now are just hormones. And so I think that there can be innovation around treating the symptoms of menopause, even if the virtual community platforms are being handled. And one other thing I want to mention, you know, we're living in the time of, you know, one of the biggest civil rights movements in the world. And I do want to say that mostly the saturation is for affluent Caucasian women. Medicaid covers nearly half of the births in the US. And so if your product is not covered by Medicaid, I don't know if half of the births are getting it, right? And so that is something I also just want to throw out there. We need to be mindful. We are a new industry and we can be an amazing industry if we from the get-go are mindful about these things, about instead of backtracking. Oops, do we have diversity in our leadership, right? Like making sure that's part of it right from the get-go. Areas open for innovation. Here is what I you know, kind of came up with based off of our database, based off our interviews, based on my experience being a thought leader in this industry. Pelvic floor health. This includes urinary and fecal incontinence. Prolapse, #1 reason that women are put into nursing homes is prolapse. And then painful sex is what that last term is. Healthcare delivery. So telehealth, women in rural areas that don't, 50% of counties in the US do not have an OB-GYN in their county. And women have to travel hours to go to one. So how can we, accessibility here, accessibility and affordability of healthcare delivery. And multidisciplinary teams. Why do women have to have 6 different doctors for their fertility issue, right? Bringing them together. Uterine health, endometriosis, PCOS, PMS. 80% of women have had to take a day off of work at least once a year because of menstrual pain, right? How can we help women with this? Vaginal health, your microflora, your vaginal atrophy, yeast infections, contraception, so hormone-free birth control, because you may think contraception is handled, but 50% of pregnancies in the US are unplanned. When I heard that statistic, I was like, oh my gosh. So when I think of contraceptive, I not only think of therapeutics or, you know, devices or, you know, I also think of sexual education for contraceptive. 50% of pregnancies in the US unplanned. Mental health. 1 in 5 women in the United States have been sexually assaulted. And I think there can be a lot of innovation for PTSD specifically for women. Veteran women, whenever we see the PTSD campaigns for men that went to war, I rarely see the women. And so I think that we can do a lot of good work there for the mental health of women, accessibility, affordability, and awareness. And then bone health, heart health, brain health, autoimmune. Women are, I actually don't have the statistic handy, but way, way, way more likely to have an autoimmune disease compared to a man. So very, very important. Life after cancer. Women, you know, they survive cancer. We say, oh my gosh, you're a survivor. You're in remission. You're amazing. And meanwhile, her vagina has healed shut because of radiation. She has lost her option for fertility. Her libido is 0%. There is life after cancer that needs addressing. We're actually working with Livestrong Foundation right now on trying to solve some of those problems. And also queer and trans health. There needs to be some awakening around, you know, how do these people get the health care that they need? So these are the things I believe are open for innovation. Here are some of the trends I've seen in business models for femtech. A lot of them are direct to consumer products. You do have the occasional, which is amazing, insurance coverage. So if you are working on something that can be covered by insurance, take advantage. When you are a founder, you need to go where the money is, all right? And so sometimes the money is the consumer, but sometimes it's hard to get their money. And it's easier if you can get the consumer via billing their insurance, all right? So insurance covering, I see this trend. I also seeing a trend of employers. So what I mean by employers is describing to employers that their female workers or their women workers are going to be way more effective if they feel well. And what I'm seeing is Visana Health, Gila Health. I'm seeing so many companies coming around that their business model actually is selling consumer products via a healthcare plan that the employer actually pays for, and then it allows for their employees to have access to it. So I think this is very creative. Even Milk Stork, they have large corporations are paying for women that are traveling for work, having their breast milk shipped back to their babies. This is very, very creative, and I love it. Also, again, we need to validate ourselves, right? Like good scientists. So Rock Health also had a graph about the business models, and they also showed mostly individual consumer, followed by provider, which is like insurance, providers, doctors paying for medical devices to be into their OR, whatever, employers covering it, and then payer, which is the insurance. Now, why is payer so low? I think we're going to talk about that later. We have an issue in women's health and wellness where insurance struggles to see the importance of women's health and wellness, and we're going to talk about that. We need some policy changes around insurance coverage. Sales and branding. So this is one of the reasons I think it's so important to have a FemTech specific accelerator, because the things that you may get advice on in other accelerators or other programs may not be the best advice for you as a FemTech founder. These are the three main things I have noticed work the best for successful FemTech companies. Community. Even if you sell a physical product, by having a community board or a Slack channel or a group for your consumers to mingle with each other, I have seen this work out very, very well. Women want to get to know the product intimately, meaning who is the team building it? Who are the other people using it? So I see community as being a very important aspect of your company, even if you're not a social networking app. Education. So a lot of women, we grew up learning about what our period was, and no one told us the last chapter that one day your period ends and you experience 35 symptoms, right? And so there's all these women that are like, I'm having real bad hot flashes. I guess this is normal. I have to deal with it. And so what we need to do is educate. There are so many women that think that painful sex is normal sex. We need to educate. And so educating your consumer by having blogs and interviews and, going out there and finding the right medically validated research for your consumer. They are going to trust you more, and they're going to be so grateful, because there's a lot of crap on Google. We all know that. And the last one, super, super important and very, very interesting, is that the number one sales strategy and tactic for FemTech companies is actually through referrals. For every one menstrual cup sold, that woman will convert at least 2 other women into wearing menstrual cups as well. You did not have to pay for any Facebook ads in order to get them to in order for them to use a menstrual cup. You just needed to get that one woman to convert, and she converted 2 other women. So a lot of these topics are, things women don't really talk about with anyone except their best girlfriend or their sister. And so if their sister is struggling with the same issue as her, and she says, I found a solution, this is it, that sister will say, oh my gosh, I got to check it out. So referrals, use your customers. Women are going to trust other women that are succeeding with your product or service. These are some FemTech organizations around the world that FemTech Focus is partnered with all of them in different respects. They all have their each strength. So we have Health Tech Hive, which is mostly research out of London. FemTech Insider, incredible newsletter. You need to subscribe to their newsletter. Fermata out of Japan. Hi, Mita. Amazing episode on FemTech in Japan. They actually have their own venture fund and a FemTech store in Tokyo. Super cool. Menstrual Health Hub, they're a consulting firm that actually specializes in women-centered design. So how do you design things that are actually for women? The best example I always think about is a seatbelt. Women have breasts and women get pregnant, and no seatbelt. How do you change? Where do you put the seatbelt? So all the test dummies don't have breasts or pregnant bellies. And so we need to figure out what is women-centered design and make sure everyone is considering a woman's body when they're designing something. Women of Wearables, also incredible organization, amazing newsletter. They have awesome events every month. Check them out. FemTech Collective, if you're not on their Slack channel, you got to get on there. Future of FemTech, it's the conference central. So she's actually having a wellness conference just next week. Eve is a mini FemTech accelerator in Israel. And then we have FemTech Focus. We are a podcast. And next year we are partnered with the Guild, launching an early stage virtual accelerator. And next year, FemTech Focus is going to be launching a healthcare 12-week virtual accelerator and potentially a venture fund as well. Stay tuned for that. All right, FemTech investment. So I kind of think about it in three main categories. We have the true FemTech investors. They say, I am a FemTech investor. I invest in women's health and wellness specifically. So we have Portfolio FemTech Fund. They're actually about to launch their second fund for fundraising. That means that their first fund went really well. So investments are going to be available through their second fund. Fermata out of Japan. The Case for Her is another fund. Avestria Ventures, another fund, and Reformation is a new fund that's forming right now. You can also just look at any fund that invests in females. So a lot of us are female founders, so you can go to female founder funds. You can go to healthcare funds, medical device funds, therapeutic funds, future of work. So lactation suites, right? That's a future of work type of thing. Aging and longevity, women as they're aging, you know, there's funds that literally fund things for aging elders, right? And so if you are doing a product that specifically affects older women, that could be a fund that invests in you. Consumer product funds. So really, the world is our oyster. We are not confined to just AI, you know, SaaS funds. We actually can pick from a lot of these based on what your product is and what they invest in. And then there's alternative funding. So you have foundations like Livestrong Foundation as grants that they're deploying. You have regular government grants. My co-founder, Dr. Julie Hakim, has done over $2 million in funding from the government for her vaginal stint. Pitch competitions, get up there, girls, like, and men. I don't know if we have any men here. I hope so, but shout out, holler. Pitch competitions, get up on stage, tell that story. And then crowdfunding. One of the biggest ways that sex tech companies are fundraising is via crowdfunding, because the public knows that comfortable and pleasurable sex is important. This is some of the trends we're seeing in investment. In 2018, there was $620 million invested in FemTech. In 2019, so last year, was 592, so a little bit less. And then year to date, as of August 1st of this year, we have $367 million over 57 deals. So we're on track to hit the 2018 number, which is very impressive considering we're in a pandemic and investments have slowed down. Only 3% of US digital health deals since 2011. So we're like 9 years. Only 3% of them have focused on women's health, even though we're half the population, which is crazy. Some recent FemTech deals to note, Maven Clinic raised 45 million, Series C. Sierra Prognostics, 65 million, Series D. Kind Body, we just had them on our podcast, 32 million, Series B. TMRW, Life Sciences, 36 million, Series B. Cara, 40 million, Series C. If anyone is saying FemTech is not getting funded, we are. And I'm going to talk to you about how we're not enough, but we are. So I think there's a difference between, oh, like there's zero action happening and like we, you know, are killing it. We're birthing it, as I like to say. We're on track to birthing it. Okay. So don't feel discouraged that we're at ground zero. We are getting millions in funding. Here's the top 10 funded FemTech companies as of this year. We have Future Family, Progeny, which went IPO. Get your stocks, ladies. Symmetrics, Nurx, where I get my birth control from. Thank you. Maven Clinic, Renovia, Pill Club, Kind Body, Clio, and Tia. The most raised is Future Family with $118 million total raise. So millions are coming in. It's coming. Exits. I really want to talk about exits. I keep hearing people say, well, once we have an exit, everything will change. And I keep saying, I keep meeting people who've had exits. So what's going on here? And I think that we have a journalism issue. I think we have an awareness issue. And I think we have a filtering of the word vagina issue. You know, maybe part of the lack of publications is because they're going to have to talk about periods and vaginas and clitorises and nipples, right? Like maybe that's the issue, or I don't know what it is, but we need some bigger advocates in journalism to get these numbers and these stories out there. So we actually have 2 slides of exits here. I mean, take a screenshot if you'd like. We need to get this information around. So I have bolded $2 billion exits on this slide alone. And then we have a whole nother slide, again, 2 other, so 4 in total billion-dollar exits. We have at least 3 IPO'd companies. And just this week, the third to bottom on the right, Acesia, $80 million exit for fibroid treatment, exited this week. I don't know if any of y'all heard about it, but we had an exit this week, right? So things are moving. And so the summary of this is that to date, I have counted 32 exits. If I've missed an exit, tell me. Let's get this list as robust as possible and let's send it to PitchBook and tell them to publish it. Because the more investors that see the exits and the returns that have been made on women's health and wellness, the more likely they are to see your email about, you know, uterine pain, and they're going to say, oh yeah, I just read that report about how all these people made all this money. I want some of that money. I'm going to reply to them, right? So we need to get and shout out loud this, these exits. 3 IPOs, again, there may be more. I was interviewing Dare Biosciences, the CEO is Sabrina. I was interviewing her the other day. She was like, yeah, we're a publicly traded company. And I was like, okay, adding you to the list, another IPO. So like, let's make this list complete and continue to update it. Over 4 $1 billion exits. And then 6 exits happened in 2019. That's a 64% increase from 2018. And my suggestion is that we need more avid journalism and advocates to get the word out. We must spark FOMO in investors. I have 3 slides about the biggest barriers for femtech. So this is the first category, which is a barrier in funding. So in general, women get less funding than men. The 3 out of the 4 most funded women's wellness companies are run by men. And so I think there is an issue of, you know, it's not just that we're talking about vaginas in a boardroom, it's that we're women, and women historically get less VC funding. Another thing against us is that men don't realize that women are having painful sex. They've never heard of this. They've never heard of this $1 billion market. We don't know what menopause is. We're the ones with the uterus, right? They certainly are not going to know about period, pain. And so the male VCs, we need more female general partners at VC firms. So we don't have to have 4 slides describing why, periods are painful, right? And then untold exits and market sizes, like I just went through. Another issue for femtech is research. So how do we quantify female arousal? So when you have Viagra and they're doing the research and they're saying, well, does Viagra work? They ask, does he have an erection? And does he orgasm, right? How long does the erection last for? When a woman is aroused, how are we going to quantify that? Because we're all different shapes and sizes and experiences. And so I've been talking to some sexual wellness companies that need FDA approval. And one of the big issues is the diagnostics of how do you measure arousal in women? It's not as, ones and zeros as a mechanical man. So that's something interesting to think about for research. FDA approval. FDA, their job is to make sure that a drug is significantly better for you than the experience you're having with that pain. And so let's say there's a yeast infection and you've created a drug that can get rid of your yeast infection. Well, yeast infections aren't deadly. They're just real uncomfortable and unpleasant. And so if there's a side effect of the yeast infection medication that potentially is worse than just being uncomfortable, the FDA may not approve of it. And so we're going to we have to work with the FDA, and it's something interesting, the barriers there. And then also there's historical and systemic exclusion of women in research. We just have not been included. So many founders that I interview, they say, the founder of KEG says, cervical fluid's important for fertility. And I said, why? And she said, we don't know. Everyone knows that it's important, but we don't know why. No one's done the research. And so this is what femtech founders are doing. We're literally discovering as we're innovating. And a statistic I added in the bottom here is $500 billion annually go to medical expenses attributed to women, yet only 4% of all healthcare research and development is targeted for women's health. Last section of barriers is business. So the lack of CPT codes. CPT is essentially the, barcode, if you will, of how an insurance company can reimburse something in the healthcare system. And so if codes don't exist because endometriosis was still described as hysteria 20 years ago, how are you going to bill hysteria when they have endometriosis? And so we have an issue with billing codes. Blocked ads. In Vogue, you can say penis, but you cannot say vagina. Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are blocking our advertisements. You can say erectile dysfunction, but you cannot say sexual wellness. We need to petition these leaders and tell them that we need to start to talk about this. Our period blood is not blue. Thank you, Tampax, for your commercials, but it's actually red. So how do we get the right ads out there? And then disqualified from conferences and competitions. I know a lot of you know the story of Lioness being excused from a conference, and you can't have a table here, you are a vibrator, that is inappropriate. Or I'm thinking about her product's name, it's Osei. It'll come, Laura DiCarlo, yes. Laura DiCarlo won the CES Best Tech, and then they took her prize away because she was actually a vibrator. And how horrible is that? So we have business and barriers. What I think the industry needs the most right now is awareness, investment, research, and changes in policy. If we can get more women in Congress, so I hope that all of you, if you are in the United States, please register to vote. Please, please, please vote. If we have more women in Congress, they will have a say in how Medicare and Medicaid is spent for health, what is covered, what is not covered. And as more Medicaid and Medicare coverage is for women's health, the rest of the marketplace, the other private insurances will have to follow. And so truly your vote counts for vaginas, it does. In summary, FemTech is a technology service or product that improves women's health and wellness. It is not female founder specific and includes things that either solely, disproportionately, or differently affect females and women. The market is largely underserved with huge opportunities for growth. What's pretty saturated, but little asterisks on all of these is fertility, menstruation, maternal health, sexual wellness, breastfeeding, menopause, again, asterisks. What's really open for innovation, pelvic floor, healthcare delivery, uterine, vaginal, maternal health, queer and trans health, bone, heart, brain, autoimmune health, and post-cancer lifestyle health. There have been exits. Let's talk about them. And FemTech needs awareness, funding, research, and policy changes. Thank you so much for listening to my overview of FemTech. I do not know what time it is because my screen is shared. I hope we have time for questions. And if you gotta go, I get it. Please follow us at FemTech Focus, subscribe to our newsletter, go to @GetGilded. And if you are a FemTech startup and you want to experience things like one-on-one consulting with myself or my co-founder or Anne, you gotta apply. letsguildacademy.com/FemTech. All right, Anne, what time is it? Do we have time for questions?
Yes, we do. We have 10 minutes left, and we get a lot of comments here saying, amazing review. Thank you. Really, really insightful, brilliant, so informative. Thank you, and so forth. And we got a lot of comments during your presentation that I think will be really helpful for us to review later and perhaps build some in. So there was some question around dermatology, for instance, and the female skin versus the male skin, and where that falls and things like that. So maybe you can talk to that, and then in the meantime we'll cue some questions here.
Okay. So in terms of dermatology, I have to admit that my list of femtech companies is by no means exhaustive, right? If someone was to tell me that, it actually happens all the time. So someone told me once that headaches are femtech, and I said, headaches. Femtech, I don't think so. And she said 80% of hospitalizations for migraines are women. And I was like, okay, femtech, totally. And so I think if somebody, you know, published an article that said women's skin is very different from men's skin, and here's how, and here's why it's being overlooked, and why it needs to be addressed, and how their products need to be different, the services need to be different. Yeah, added to the list. Dermatology, totally. You know, sometimes you can get kind of fuzzy, especially with skincare. I saw some people were including like makeup companies in skincare, and I was like, well, men wear makeup too, you know, like it didn't seem specific for women's skin. So you just gotta be mindful and to see where does it fall.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And I think there's a few other areas as well, right? You know, specific
there's
ones.
Nutrition, there's, I mean, like
stroke you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah, the list goes on and on. All right, do we have any questions? How do you think we can bring this awareness of women's health into early R&D so that pharma companies will develop drugs for women? Like you said, 80% of autoimmune patients are female, so why is there no product that is tailored towards them? And that's a question from Eva Crowell.
So I think that how do we get more early stage research and development focusing on women's health? I think it's by getting more women into STEM. Women will be naturally curious about things that, you know, affect them. There's so many people that are in cancer research because their parent or grandparent died from cancer, or the same for heart disease. And so I think as we get more women into STEM and research, we will see more. Unfortunately, a lot of times when you enter STEM, you are bound to the research of your boss. And our bosses currently in the scientific field are still like in their 50s and 60s. And so I think that there's going to be this next generation where, you know, scientists like myself, I'm 29, if I didn't come the femtech route, let's say I stayed in the laboratory, when I opened a lab, I potentially, you know, would do something specifically for women's health. So I think that's how we can influence early stage R&D. Also, we need to have more grants available. So maybe there are laboratories that want to do vaginal tissue research, but there are not grants really readily available. And so they have to tweak what they research based on the money that's available from the National Institutes of Health, NIH, or NSF, National Science Foundation. Once again, register to vote, because, let me not be political and just say that government will direct how much grant money goes to science and research. And then even within that, what is it being spent on? And so we need women, people who care about uteruses, in political power, because the money is there.
Yeah, go vote. That's a good point here. Question about how to convince a company to buy a product that is focused on improving the health of half of their employees. I'm building a product for women's mental health, and I'm encountering sorry, this problem when thinking about the business plan. And so I think you have Anke on the call too, who worked for Willow for a long time, and she did sales there and talked to a lot of employers, right? And like, how do you bring that topic to the front of their HR departments and get that buy-in that maybe, you know, even other products, there's so many products that employers could provide to really increase not just the the health of the women, but also the mental space and the productivity.
So I've actually interviewed several startups that are doing an employer buyer business model. And I've actually asked them the same thing. How did you convince them that, you know, endometriosis is affecting their employees and they should invest money into this? Was it hard? Was it really hard to convince them? And so far, all the startups I've talked to said it's not that hard to convince them, because what employers know now is that millennials, we want good healthcare benefits and we turn over quickly. And so you as an employer want to provide the best benefits to your employees. And so by saying that you care about women's health and your employees' health, and providing these types of benefits and these offers, it goes a long way for the brand of the employer And, you know, people are watching in the world of social media. And like, if you are a company that says that you support women, but then you don't have any healthcare coverage for women, that story may come out and look bad. And so, not to say that the best sales strategy is to essentially say like, hey, you don't want to be caught with your pants down, employer, like you need to do what you say you're going to do, right? But it is showing up that employers do care about their female employees, because we're rock stars. We are rock stars. And, you know, they don't want employees taking time off or being distracted by their pains or their chronic illnesses. And so, so far I've seen pretty positive employer feedback for integrating women's health and wellness into their benefit packages.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And sometimes you'd wonder if it made sense to do one sale to the company that includes multiple awesome solutions,
Yeah.
right? And I think that is a new field for entrepreneurs to think about too. You know, how can you collaborate with other you know, startups to offer a whole package and maybe not just your solution.
Yeah. Also, a lot of HR decision makers are women, and that's who you need to get on board. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Interested in Brittany's thoughts on how to balance access to data. So closing the data gap in women's health and enhancing research and innovation in this area versus user privacy. And there was another question around this before around data and what you think about capturing women's data through apps.
Great question. So I am a geneticist and I owned a DNA-based dating app. I literally sold DNA kits to people to swab their mouth with, and I had their genetic information. I have talked a lot about data privacy. So I just want to lay that out there. Why should I even have any opinion about this? I always like to validate myself why I'm allowed to talk about this. So my experience has been with consumers is that, number one, you should only measure the data that you need in order for your product to work. So as a DNA-based dating app, we only look at genes that predict attraction. They're called your HLA genes. That's a talk for another time. It's probably already on YouTube. But we only looked at those genes. I did not look at your Alzheimer's risk. I didn't look at my users' chance for cancer or their ethnicity. I didn't look at any of that. I only looked at their genes for attraction. And that's important for the company and the consumer because they want to pay you. If they're going to pay a dating app for a scientific test, they only want you looking at what you say you're going to look at. So I think that's a really great boundary to have when you're thinking about data privacy. The second part is having double blind, de-identification. So at the end of the day, there were several codes to figure out whose anonymized data it actually was. And so this is really important. And we do live in a time of incredible cybersecurity. And so I think that there's a lot of research that needs to be done in women's health and wellness, and we're collecting all of this data. And I think that it would be an absolute tragedy to not do research on the collected data from your female consumers, but you must not identify them. It must be de-identified. And moreover, you should get their consent about it. I think that women want to contribute to research. And if you tell them, hey, listen, as you wear this Kegel ball and we're measuring your cervical fluids, do you consent? I don't know if Keg is doing this. I'm just using their example, but do you consent to us using this data anonymized? We won't know it's your code number 0045, cervical fluid data set. Do you consent to us using that data to improve women's health and wellness? And I think women want to support women. And as long as you communicate with this to them, I think the issue with 23andMe was that they did not communicate it very well. And so people were surprised. Don't surprise your customer. If you're going to use their data, get them to buy in. In fact, get them to champion you in doing the research. So I do think it's something to be mindful of, but it's something you can absolutely work around. Something I always said at Fairmore was that, hey, if I was selling your data, I wouldn't be charging you $45 for this DNA kit. And, consumers aren't stupid. And when I broke that down for them, they're like, oh yeah, that's right. Because the people that sell my data, I can use it for free, right? And so sometimes it's that basic algorithm that you got to kind of lay out there.
Such good points. And I think also, we're talking here about you know, the community and how we can stay engaged. So absolutely, you know, join us on the Guild. We have a FemTech specific group there as well. And Brittany's on the Guild, and the Guild Academy FemTech Edition course will be hosted within that platform as well. So you're going to have everything at your fingertips. And if you need PR advice, you can reach out to Jules, who is here on the call as well, also part of the Guild, right? And I think that's why we're trying to collaborate and why we're trying to put the pieces together so that we're not all in our own little bubbles and there's no cross-pollination going on, which is so important for everybody. Any other questions? I might have missed a few. There was a lot of action here going on, so please feel free to add it in. We're right at the mark here. So I would say, Brittany, this was fantastic. I am so happy we're partnering on this. And I'm very, very excited that so many people joined in today here, and we're gonna share the recording. We're gonna share also the link where you can download the database and all the goodies that we saw in the chat come up, all the good book recommendations, etc. We're gonna put all that in the share email after this as well.
Good,
and then
good, yeah.
I would say, you know, if you're not a FemTech founder yet and you're thinking about it, definitely check out our program. We're also going to host a town hall where you can ask all your questions specific to the Guild Academy FemTech Edition program. And then we're also going to do a similar version of this with a few FemTech entrepreneurs at Serendipity, our virtual summit on 9/14. So save the date for 3 to 4 p.m. Brittany will do a short version of what we heard today, and then we'll introduce a few of our amazing experts as well. So much insights, Brittany. Thank you. And I'm just excited to collaborate.
Yeah, if you need a new podcast in your life, check out FemTech Focus, Spotify and iTunes. It's essentially a mini version of this every week. Thank you so much, everyone. This has seriously been my pleasure.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.